I was doing some of these for men by men protocols, and I was watching my thyroid health decline. I was watching my hormones become imbalanced because I was doing way too much.
Foundational health and the extension of our health span is really found in the basics. It is amazing how well the human body functions when you give it the raw material it needs to do its job.
You don't have to keep it too complicated. It's not just one thing. It's not saying that you're not working out or you're not eating healthy. It could be in your environment as well.
I have a theory that the reason why the majority of autoimmune disease we find in females and not men is because women are so selfless.
We are biologically and physiologically different than men. There's so many different cycles of a woman's life. Premenopause, but then there's perimenopause. When you hit menopause, your risk for all causes of mortality increases substantially. So if we can delay the onset of menopause, then that could be massive for female longevity.
Talk a little bit about what you mean by like female-centric longevity protocols.
The best way to achieve optimal health or optimal fertility is
Hey guys, welcome back to the Ultimate Human Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Brecka, human biologist, where we go down the road of everything anti-aging, biohacking, longevity, and everything in between. And we've been asked lately, well, actually, not just lately, but for a year, to just feed the female audience a little better than we've been feeding them on the podcast. And I think there are some giant gaps in the biohacking community in general. Lots of us guys out there, ultra woke biohackers, talking to other ultra woke biohackers. And so we've been really focusing on our feminine audience. And so today, please welcome to the podcast, Kayla Barnes.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have you because not just because you're a female guest, because I think you're a female pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually love the fact that you didn't come from a traditionally trained medicinal background. And so tell me a little bit about how this whole biohacking journey started for you. I mean, to the place where you actually own a functional medicine clinic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I also think is amazing because you really get to see the outcomes of what you're doing with people. And, you know, a lot of my fans and audience have forwarded me your content, including my daughter, right?
I love
Which is
that.
probably the
That's
reason
so
why she's
sweet.
here. And she's a nurse, and she's a tough cookie, but she loves you and loves your content. And I love how super simple and digestible and authentic, you know, your content is. And I feel like you're also letting people get a lens into your actual life, which is amazing. But tell my audience that doesn't know you a little bit about your journey and how you ended up owning a functional medicine clinic without going to school for functional medicine.
Yeah. I mean, if we go all the way back, so I like to preface it that I did not grow up healthy. I grew up on a standard American diet, foods that I'm like, Mom, why a Pop-Tart and a toaster strudel? This is not edible, you know?
You were telling your mom that?
Well, not then, but now I think back and I'm like, Mom,
at 7, you're like, Pop-Tarts,
no,
baby.
I wish I was, but I did not. So I didn't grow up super healthy. I started studying nutrition in college and just started to make little changes, you know? That was kind of the first taste that I got of feeling better through a practice of that nature. But I got really deep into it about 5.5 years ago. So I started to prepare actually to open this clinic. And I was ordering all the labs. I'm like, what are we going to offer here? So I found, you know, Vibrant and Genova and all these, you know, unique lab companies. And I started ordering all these tests and I was getting the results back. And I was like, my doctor has never recommended a gut test. They've never looked at how many toxins I have in my body. They've never looked at my nutrient status. Like I've never seen a lab panel this in depth, right? So my mind was just open. I'm very type A. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. So I've always been building something. And I always wanted to feel my best and perform my best. So when I started getting this data back, I was like, this is incredible. So
and you did this on yourself first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did it all myself first.
Awesome.
And I was just, there were so many like red flags. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that happened. My doctor never checked that. He never looked at that. My doctor said everything was great. And, you know, I was in good health, but there was a ton of room for improvement. And
were you experiencing like anything specific, like severe brain fog, or were you
a little bit of like, you know,
or
like bloating or like, you know, some hormonal acne, things of that nature, but nothing too crazy. But I wanted to be elite. Like I knew, Gary, that if I wanted to go from where I came to the life that I have now, it was going to take an incredible level of focus, energy, stamina. So I'm like, I have to upgrade my biology. And this is the way to do it. I have all this data now. I can upgrade all these areas of my life.
Awesome. Yeah.
So that was the first step. And then I started to get on the phone with, owning a clinic. It's like, what therapies are we going to offer here? And I started doing a ton of research, just got obsessed with reading clinical studies and medical research
Mm,
and found some of the things that you actually have. So I
mm.
found like the ozone sauna or Hocket
Yeah.
as an ozone therapy. And I found hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And I started learning about NAD. I was doing peptides like way before they were cool, as I'm sure you were. I had a glucose monitor like back when you had to like actually get a prescription that you needed one and it messed
Yeah.
up your
Yeah.
whole
I had
health.
them back then
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Before they were like direct to consumer. And so I started trying this stuff out on myself. So I tried ozone therapy and hyperbaric, and I would retest and retest and retest. And around the same time, I started assembling a medical team. So we needed providers in the clinic. But I'm like, well, if we get these results back, I think we both know most doctors aren't trained on necessarily these really unique labs. So I did tons of interviews, found some great providers, and then we started looking at my data and using some of these therapies. We do methylene blue IVs and curcumin IVs. I've done essentially olive oil extract IVs, olefinilia, all this really kind of like cutting edge stuff that was not as popular back then. And I started to feel unbelievable. And I
Mm,
was seeing changes in my labs not day after day, but every single time I would test, they would start to get better. And I was just hooked. So,
that's so awesome. And like, how would you characterize your young life at this point? I mean, are you active? Are you working out? Are you conscious of your diet?
yeah.
You're pretty on your game. You just wanted to go next level.
Yeah. I mean, I was doing all the basic things at that point. I mean, I did a lot of sports and stuff in high school and gymnastics and things like that. So I was active, but I still wasn't feeling as good as I thought and knew I could.
Right. You know, one of the videos my daughter forwarded to me really caught my eye. That's when I started to take a deep dive on your content. And I super appreciated it because you're being very authentic about, you live in LA
Hmm.
and you're in the midst of the wildfires.
Yeah.
Um, so you're talking about the air quality, but the one that really piqued my interest, and I want to go down this rabbit hole, um, was the mold and the mycotoxin poisoning.
Yeah.
Because as I've been on this journey too, and also own a functional wellness clinic, which I just recently exited, but we had hundreds of thousands of patients, and there were always those ones coming through the system that were being treated quote unquote properly, right? Like
Hmm.
their triglycerides were in range, their cholesterol was fine, their hormones weren't particularly out of whack. Their CBC and their metabolic panels were normal, nothing going on in the liver, the kidneys were healthy. So, everything was, let's say, quote unquote, in range, right?
Hmm.
Maybe they need some D3, but nothing was jumping off the page, but they were miserable,
Yeah.
like miserable. And the labs wouldn't tell the story of the person that was in front of you,
Yeah.
so you'd see this woman, and I'm like, okay, if I believe the diet that you're telling me that you eat, I know that you're active. I mean, I'm looking at what you're telling me about your activity level, but they were just bloated, or they had massive brain fog, or um, really abnormal menstrual cycling, and
Hmm.
things that you wouldn't tie back to the bugs and the pathogens, the mold, the mycotoxins, the viruses, the parasites. And our functional medicine doctor, Dr. Sardo, who's a board certified OBGYN, had a lot of training in this area. And she started to bring in these functional labs like the vibrant testing.
Hmm.
And and what we'd find were, in these unsolvable cases, was generally one of these underliers. And when
Hmm.
we started, testing for those and treating for those, this is when we saw the real miracles happen,
Yeah.
right? Because most people are super responsive to the therapy, and it's very obvious from their labs. But you were talking about your mold toxicity. If you want protein to build lean muscle, but without the caloric impact or need to cut, you need Perfect Amino. It's pure essential amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, in a precise form and ratio that allows for near 100% utilization in building lean muscle and no caloric impact. So we build protein 6 times as much as whey, but without the excess body fat we normally get during bulking. This is the new era of protein supplementation, and it's real. If you want to build lean muscle without having to cut, you need Perfect Amino. Now let's get back to the Ultimate Human podcast. I think this is one, especially in areas like Miami, we're the mold
Hmm.
capital of the world.
Yeah.
We won that lottery. Go Miami. And this second one, according to one of the functional medicine docs I know, is actually Malibu, California.
Mm,
And I was like,
yeah,
that surprises me because it's not super humid out
it's
there.
not. Yeah, but there is obviously exposure to so much water mixed with
Yeah,
the
the
heat.
water, the climate. Maybe it's because you AC in the in the summertime, and maybe they're leaving the windows open in the wintertime. But talk a little bit about the testing that you did. What, if any, symptoms you were having,
Yeah,
and like I'm particularly interested in the journey you went on to walk yourself out of it.
yeah. I mean, I've seen so many of, the clients that live come in with mold, and as you know,
Hmm.
it can really like wreck your life, and it is something that often goes undiagnosed for so long, if ever found. So I have been doing at least quarterly, sometimes even more frequently, something called the total toxic burden. And the reason why, real quick, that I think
And that's
this is,
Vibrant, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I've done that too. It's
particularly
amazing.
important for women because we know that women actually experience a higher toxic exposure than men in the form of like personal care products and fragrances and cleaning products. So it's estimated that women leave the home with about 200 toxins
Hmm.
versus about 100. So it's about double than men. So I love this test because this is also, before we dive into the mold, going to look at things like paraben and phthalates and all of these
EPAs and
endocrine disruptors that we're exposed to, right? That many times we don't even know. They're snuck into fragrances and your body lotions and all these different products that we're applying on a daily basis. So I love it for women for that reason. And we also know that, women are a bit slower detoxers because we prioritize fat storage, right?
hmm
So in
which is where a lot of these
combination,
go, right?
right.
To
So
go
if
into the
we are
storage.
exposed to more toxins and detox them a little bit more poorly than men do, then I love this test for that reason. But I do this test all the time. So I have a pretty good baseline.
Hmm.
And during the fires, I did it mid fire. So it was on the fire started on January 7th. I did the test on the 18th. And the results that came back were something like I've never seen before. My medical team didn't even believe that these were my results.
Wow.
Everything in the red. I went from having 3 toxins in the medium range to having over 20 in the high range.
Yeah.
And you're familiar with this test.
Yeah.
Incredibly alarming,
And so,
right?
dude, some
So
of these things you don't even recognize, and you start looking it up, and you're like, byproduct of jet fuel. Like, what?
insane,
It's a
insane.
fire accelerant. And but I
Yeah.
guess if you think of what's burning in these
Homes.
homes, I
Yeah.
mean, it's everything's being essentially vaporized. And you said something
Yeah.
really interesting to me on my balcony. You said, they show that the air quality is decent,
Yeah.
but it's actually not the number of particles in the air; it's
Yeah.
what's in the particle.
Exactly. So if you're in LA right now and you're looking at the AQI, and this is a measurement essentially of like particle size, and the particles could be anything. They could be skin cells, could be from trees, ash, whatever.
Hmm?
But it's clearly very concerning that these particles are obviously, based on my results, are made up of things like heavy metals and massive amounts of environmental toxins I've never had. My BPA went from the lowest range it could be to through the roof. So these are like plastics, and nothing about my lifestyle has changed. No, I avoid plastics in clothing. I avoid plastics every which way you could do.
Mm.
At the airport, I won't even take like a paper cup. So I avoid that at all costs. But all of these molds and mycotoxins came back in my labs, tons of environmental toxins and, tons of heavy metals too that I had never had
Yeah.
before. So if you are living in LA, I don't want it to be like a fear tactic. I mean, personally, my husband and I are going to move
Mhm.
because I don't think this is going to be an isolated incident. All of that, debris is going to be cleaned up over the next 2 years. And we know it's just going to be kicked back into the air.
Right.
If you look into it at 9/11, there were only a few buildings in comparison to how many were just burned in LA. And there are about 130,000 people enrolled in a program
Mhm.
from the government because of all their health issues. So I just saw something the other day that they weren't going to test in LA. They weren't going to look at the toxins. Of course they're not,
Of
right?
course not.
Because then everybody would leave. I mean, these are toxins that are linked to cancer and infertility and issues with pregnancy. So it's so important that you either, I guess, live inside because you can. I have lots of high quality air
Yeah.
filtration. But for me, I mean, I'm just going to get out. But when it comes to the mold, so I've done quite a bit. Luckily, I have quite a few tools at my disposal. I mean, I'm a huge fan of sauna in general.
So am I.
I do sauna. I was
Natural
doing
detox.
sauna about 4 times a week. Now I'm doing it every single day because we need to get these toxins out. I usually take a binder beforehand, which I really
And how
love.
do you sauna? Do you have actually like a walk-in sauna, or do you use a sauna
Yeah.
blanket, or?
I have two saunas. So I have a infrared sauna with a built-in red light therapy. I've been loving that because it kind of stacks two of the therapies I want to do together.
I love that too.
Yeah, I love anytime I can
Anything
get
that can
two things.
compress time and do more stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I have that, and then I have a finished sauna outside. So I kind of go between the two, but usually, 20 minutes at 176 to 212. That's what all the studies are based on for all the longevity and cardiovascular benefits. But massively leaning into sauna. I did something called therapeutic plasma exchange.
I love that.
Right after
Did you do
I
that
got
at Next Health?
I did, yeah.
With Dr. Darshan?
Yep.
Yeah, I love him.
So,
Great guy.
I mean, I'm actually have another test that's pending. So I will have new total toxic burn results that I'll release. Obviously, the expectation is that they've been reduced significantly. But for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what plasma exchange is, so they actually take all of your plasma out of your body. I think I got about 2.5 liters.
Yeah.
And they replace it with albumin.
It's
and then
so
you're
wild. You hold that bag up and you're like, it's like 2 liters of yellow soda. I mean, and it's heavy. And
it is really heavy.
Wow.
Yeah, I was surprised. So I did that. I'm going to do probably 2 to 3 more sessions of that because for me, it was disappointing, but like you mentioned, we always have a journey, right? So my husband and I wanted to try to conceive. I just made like an hour long video on all the things for fertility optimization.
I mean, we're going to go into that too, because you just piqued the interest of every female on this podcast.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's a bummer that this had to happen. It's like, you're doing everything. I do so much. Everybody jokes I like live in a bubble and people think I'm so boring life because I go to bed at 8:30 and I don't drink alcohol and I don't go to nightclubs. But I am doing all these things. And then, just an environmental disaster in LA, it can just wipe that out.
Yep.
I mean, I'm very grateful that I'm equipped to deal with it. So doing the plasmapheresis, the TPE, also doing EBU. So, very high dose ozone therapy helps to filter the blood as well. And I actually am taking something. It's a prescription called listeramine. I could be pronouncing that slightly wrong, but it has really interesting research. So its initial indication was for cholesterol management, lipid management. But in a study, it actually removed 60% of the PFAS from the individuals over a 12-week period. So I had this in my back pocket. I knew about this study. As soon as I got my lab results back, I sent it to my doctor and I said, hey, thoughts, I think we should do this. He agreed. And so I'm also doing that, which I'm very excited about because, I mean, if this can help pull out a lot of those toxins, PFAS, all those molds, and help really reduce the toxic burden, I think that's going to be an exciting one as well.
Yeah. And so, first of all, I would totally agree with you, activate the natural detox pathways, which is, sauna, hydration, maybe glutathione. I heard you say that you were taking glutathione in a binder as well.
Yep. Love a little bit of binder, just help bind to the toxins and pull them out.
Were you using activated charcoal, zeolite?
Yeah, I use the Quicksilver binder, so that's my preference.
Is that activated charcoal, or do you know what that is?
It is activated charcoal.
Okay, yeah. So that's great because that's binding the toxins, and then EBU or EBO2 is sort of a really advanced ozone. I've posted a lot about it lately, where they filter the blood and add ozone to it. Sometimes they will run it through a light filter too, and then put it back
UV
in.
light.
But what's really interesting, we talked about this before the podcast started, is I took the waste container that had, the collection container, and sent that to a lab for urinalysis. And this is where I saw all of the toxins that you're referring to: the aflatoxin A, aflatoxin B, the polyfluoral alkyls, all of these weird accelerants like jet fuel and really, crazy environmental toxins that were in there. So if you're listening to this and you're from LA, there are things that you can do. And the total plasma exchange is even next level because that will replace it with sterile albumin, and your body will remake that plasma. But a lot of the junk kind of hangs out in there. And I've heard you also talk about the need for female focused longevity protocols. What do you mean by that? I mean, first of all, you and your husband are on a similar journey to my wife and I. We're in this sort of couples journey together.
I know.
She makes a lot of fun of me, but she's also fully on board for it.
Yeah, love that.
And although I just put a hyperbaric in our master bedroom, so there's a little friction there on that one. But
we have one in our master bedroom as well.
You do?
So
okay.
Our master bedrooms actually look just slightly bigger, but it looks very similar with the Faraday cage and the hyperbaric in there.
Yeah. Guys, I mean, people think you're crazy, but it's like, I don't collect cars. I don't collect watches.
There's no better investment. We get one body, it's amazing that people And I completely understand that it can be a very expensive industry to be in. I'm excited for that to hopefully uh, be reduced in cost soon. But I mean, for me, there's nothing else I would rather spend my money on.
Yeah. No, me too. I mean, I'd rather buy a red light therapy bed than a Ferrari because
Yeah,
Ferrari's doing nothing for your cellular
totally.
biology. But talk a little bit about what you mean by, you know, female, like female centric longevity protocols.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, women are not small men. So most of the data that we have, like scientific research, is done on men.
Mm.
And what we've kind of tried to do so far is say, okay, let's parse this out and just make it a little bit less for the women, kind of essentially. Like
Yeah. They just
the
do it by body
idea,
weight. You're right.
yeah, that women are just small men, but that's completely not true.
Hmm.
We are biologically and physiologically different than men. And women have a 28 to 30-day cycle, whereas men, you guys, it's kind of a little bit like Groundhog Day, right? It's like the same thing over and over. So uh, makes
I am
it
deeply offended by that. But no, it's so true. It's so
but it
true.
makes it much easier,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't have these hormonal fluctuations. Not to mention that there's so many different cycles of a woman's life, right? I mean, I'm in my childbearing years, premenopause, but then there's perimenopause, menopause. So every one of those phases requires something a little bit different. And when I started on my biohacking journey, we have a lot of mutual friends like Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield and all these
Hmm.
people. And it's great, but I was doing some of these like for men by men protocols,
Hmm.
and I was watching my thyroid health decline. I was watching my hormones become imbalanced because I was doing way too much.
Yep.
We
I
know that
totally agree.
women, they perceive and experience stress at much higher levels than men.
Hmm.
So if I try to do the same thing that you do, let's say, you can cold plunge every day, all day.
Right.
That's great. But as a woman, my body interprets that very differently, and given where I'm at in my cycle. So we can walk down the line of nutrition, sleep, exercise, biohacking. I mean, there's nuance for all of these for women.
Yeah. My wife and I noticed that too. And we noticed it in the clinical practice too, that, one size fits all, let's say, intermittent fasting for men versus one size fits all intermittent fasting for women. And we, some of the worst endocrine disasters we would see in
Yeah.
women were young menstruating females that were
Hmm.
otherwise, very healthy, fit, active, um, that had very narrow feeding windows.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at it, some of these women would have really responsive insulin. So they were very insulin sensitive, and their blood sugar was very often hypoglycemic. And
Hmm.
so they spent like long amounts of time in this hypoglycemic state. Then they fed. Then when they were back in this hypoglycemic state, and what it did was it really started to slow down their metabolism.
Yep.
You'd see their thyroid hormone levels start
Hmm.
to just plummet
Yeah.
because the
That's what
pituitary
happened
is
to
like,
me.
hey, we're not getting enough nutrients, right? This
Yeah.
low blood sugar we're perceiving as starvation. And, I started really going down that rabbit hole too. And this is years ago with women, because you would see, you're right. You put men and women on these similar protocols, and you have vastly different results. And usually it's because a husband and wife are, doing
Mhm.
relatively the same thing. And it turns out to be a disaster for her and not for him.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, fertility is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Before we even talk about improving your fertility, I mean, just the state of fertility right now in the world, certainly in the United States, with the declining rates of sperm counts, the declining fertility rates in women, skyrocketing rates of spontaneous miscarriage.
Mm.
So you're on that journey right now.
Yeah.
So if that's okay if I say that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Of
good.
course.
Because it's
Yeah.
only 27 million people. It's not a big deal. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that journey, because that is one that is really going to resonate,
Yeah.
with my audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't officially started trying. Actually, we were intending on starting to try this month, but then the fires happened. And so I want to, get my body rid of these toxins first. Um, but I think that, and I don't want to make it seem like you have to do all these things.
Mm.
Remember, I'm like in the biohacking industry. So I'm doing all these things that might seem way extra. But I think for me, if we start thinking about labs, what am I looking to optimize? So we know that the mitochondria come from the mother. We know that the gut is coming from the mother.
Mhm.
So for me, And in this recent video I just did, I start with gut testing
Mm,
and optimizing some of these tests in order to potentially optimize and extend fertility. I would,
mm.
when we're done talking about this, I would love to talk about ovarian aging because I think that's like the
Ooh,
future,
I
right? And
like
I
that
have
one too.
some things that I'm trialing. Again, there's not a lot of research, and I've talked to almost every, ovarian aging expert, but the female ovaries age at double the speed that any other organ does, and we still don't know why. But I have some theories, just first principles thinking. But to go back to fertility, so some things that I have done have been gut optimization. I think there is
Amazing.
such a story for optimizing your gut, not only because, you'll be passing on to your child, but because we know that gut dysbiosis and so many of the gut issues can lead to autoimmune conditions. We know
Right.
that 80% of autoimmune conditions are women. And
That's
this
right.
is like, this should be a huge red flag, right?
Right.
And we know that if you optimize the gut, it can also help to reduce your risk of some of these conditions. So I think gut optimization is number one. I like a test called the GI effects by Genova.
Hmm.
Any practitioner grade gut test I think would work, but I think gut health testing is super important. Reducing your toxic burden as low as you can, because again,
Mm.
you're getting ready to house another human being and the development of that human being. So if you look at things like heavy metals, molds, mycotoxins, environmental toxins, I think getting those as low as you can is super helpful. Some other things that I'm personally doing, I think it's interesting to look at biological age because we want to improve our biological age if possible prior to conceiving.
Hmm.
And again, I'm going to say the preface again. You don't have to do all this stuff. This is
Right.
just me taking it to like the
Well,
nth degree.
I like what you, and I don't mean to interrupt your thought though, but I like what you're saying about you sort of preparing the house before,
Yeah,
right, before you move in,
exactly. Yeah.
and I think that's so important. We have a lot of experience in biologic stem cells, exosomes, those kinds of treatments, and the people that respond the best are the ones that went on, a 10-week of, pre-treatment before they did that to reduce insulin and lower the inflammatory markers. So
Yeah.
I like that you're actually talking about this sort of cleaning up the house before we let the baby
Yeah.
move in, right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, for me, I wasn't given that opportunity. I mean, who knows what was going on when I was growing,
Hmm.
but I want to set the best stage. But also, we see this time and time again. I've interviewed a lot of fertility experts. Um, they say that there's about a 3-month period, prior to getting pregnant that you have the most impact. So even if you want to start now,
Oh,
you have
wow.
it's for women and men, for sperm and for eggs as they're actually forming and getting to be released. You have about 3 months prior that you can really lean into nutrition, exercise, sleep. Sleep
Yeah.
is so incredibly important. Our body is either going to prioritize fertility or it's going to prioritize survival.
Right.
And if you are in this state of constant stress, with you're not getting high quality sleep, you are maybe doing way too much too many hormetic stressors, then we won't prioritize getting pregnant. So
Mm.
really important. And I can talk about how I actually optimize my cycle with my biohacking and my nutrition and my exercise to hopefully optimize fertility outcomes. But that's some of the testing. Also, I think AMH, so anti-Müllerian hormone. If you're a woman and you're listening to this, I think you should know what your AMH is as soon as practically possible. Because although you can't actually test fertility until you try to conceive,
Hmm.
you can know your ovarian reserves. So, an AMH test will
Mm.
tell you essentially how many eggs that you have left. And you can be in your 20s and have a really low AMH. You could be in your 40s and have a high AMH. I mean,
Mm.
it's really super bio individual. But if you don't know that number, I think it's one of the most important ones because if you do have a really low AMH right now, it might be a flag that you either might consider trying a little bit earlier than you had planned or something like I'm calling it fertility preservation, something, like egg
Right.
freezing, but you should at least know where you're at because you don't this if you want a family, I don't think it's something that you want to just kind of fly blind on.
Yeah, I totally
So,
agree. So you said you're going to talk about the nutrition. So, talk about paralysis of analysis. If you get out there on, Google and you get out there on social media, any woman will just get absolutely paralyzed by information, diametrically opposed information on,
yeah.
what we should be doing or they should be doing to prepare for really healthy pregnancy. So what is your dietary journey look like?
Yeah. So that's also why getting some of these labs, because the best way to achieve optimal health or optimal fertility is your own data, right? So
Hmm.
I'm excited to be putting out all my data and sharing the protocols I'm doing, but also, as you know, I mean, you're like the master of genetics. We could
Hmm.
have different genetics. We could be detoxing differently. There's so many different factors. So best way to do it is get your own data and then optimize off that. But from a nutrition standpoint, I think we've made it way too complicated. I mean, this insane internet battle, it's
Hmm.
just focus on single ingredient foods. My diet's primarily Mediterranean. I do eat meat. I actually eat a little bit more red meat
Hmm.
during the bleed phase of my cycle because we know that we're losing blood and losing iron. But single ingredient foods, avocados, those healthy fats are so important. We know that even mothers, while being pregnant, if they eat more choline, the baby's brains develop better. So
Hmm.
things like eggs are really great. Lots of
Love that
dark
you're saying
leafy
that too.
cruciferous
Yeah.
vegetables, a lot of, high fiber, especially because you want to be detoxing, which is really important. But it's nothing too complicated. It's just single ingredient
Yeah.
foods for me. A lot of like wild caught salmon loaded with those omegas. I do an omega test as well. I always try to keep my omega index over 8. There's quite a bit of literature on extending the lifespan and even reduction in cardiovascular events. So, really focusing on omegas.
Hmm.
But you don't have to keep it too complicated. Just completely eliminating all ultra processed foods
Yeah.
for sure. And processed foods, if you can, to the best of your ability.
And how do you walk your way out of this toxic burden? Because, a lot of times people like you and I get accused of fear mongering. And it's not that we're trying to say everything's going to is going to kill you.
I mean,
It's
a lot is, but
a lot,
yes.
a lot is. So actually, that's very true. Like
Yeah.
to say it's trying to kill you.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I think people call fear mongering is us just trying to help people get around the system,
Yeah.
right? Like get through the grocery store, get through a normal day. I did a really interesting exercise after one of Dave Asprey's um, uh, biohacking events. It was years ago when he first started his biohacking summit, and there was a specialist there, and it was just this questionnaire, and you just walk through the day. And it's like, if you've never actually, if you're one of those people that isn't conscious of what you're eating and you for a week, you'd sort of document your meals,
Hmm.
you're like, holy crap, I ate like 3 chocolate bars. I ate like, I ate an extra half pound of nuts. Like you don't realize all of these things that are sort of coming at you. And so, it was really interesting for my wife, but the amount of toxic burden that you encounter throughout the
Hmm.
day. It's like, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth. Okay, well now you realize that's fluoride and high amounts of fluoride, and then you're like drinking tap water, and then your shampoo, and then your conditioner, and then your body wash, and then for women it's all of these cosmetics. So,
Hmm.
how did they start this journey of lowering their toxic load? I think the food is relatively easy.
Yeah. There's a great resource that I love. It's called the Environmental Working Group.
Oh, EWG. I'm a
Yeah.
member of those guys too.
The
I donate to
EWG.
them too. They're amazing.
Yeah, they're great. And they have something called the Skin Deep database. So, what you can do is you can literally just type in your product or brand and you can see the toxicity. It'll start to teach you what to look for. And
Really? It's
then
called
you,
Skin Deep Database?
yeah, Skin Deep
Wow, I didn't
database.
know
It's
they had
great.
that.
That's how I started. I mean, I was just running every single product through there and I was just seeing time. I was like, garbage, 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 have to throw all this stuff away. And I had no idea before that. So I think that's a great resource
Mm-hmm.
just to start slow. I don't want this to be overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
because, when you go to buy new makeup, you can get a better, more clean version of
Mm-hmm.
makeup. You can do it slow so it doesn't feel like you have to change everything overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in this industry for a while. So now I'm focusing on like, do my clothes have microplastics in them? And, the whole nine
Yeah, I'm
yards.
starting to get there too.
But just starting slower and just starting to swap out some of these products fragrance is the worst offender.
Yeah.
They can put anything in fragrance under a trademark.
Yeah.
So, and then think about where you're spraying it. You're spraying it on your thyroid. You're spraying it on your lymph nodes. I mean, day in and day out, sometimes
And your
multiple times a
radial
day.
artery and yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first things that I would probably kick to the curb is fragrance, traditional or conventional fragrance,
Mm-hmm.
and swap it out for something like an essential oil. There's also some really good brands coming about that can help women as well.
Yeah, there's some Ayurvedic brands out there that are 100% essential oils
Yeah,
that smell amazing.
smells so
That
good.
just like, they really smell like a designer perfume,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
But in terms of like cost wise, are you finding that is the industry getting to the point where there's enough competition that some of these really clean products like Branch Basics and some of these
Yeah.
other really good brands are available, widely enough available, and at a price point where people can,
Yeah.
afford them.
No, they really are. I mean, especially if you look at, a lot of women love like these luxury makeup products, right? The clean versions are actually cheaper than
Mhm.
those products. But definitely there are I think available options for really almost any budget.
And I love too that you talk about sleep, because I think very often, especially people that are getting into the biohacking space, or just going down the biohacking bandwagon, um, they want to jump the basics and like
Yeah.
get to the exotics. They're like, oh, I
Oh
read that
yeah.
NED can,
Yeah.
it's in your life, so I'm going to start NED injections, and which I don't have a problem with per se. Um, or I resveratrol. I read this thing about ashwagandha or some new root that came out that's extending life expectancy, but the truth is that foundational health and the extension of our health span is really found in the basics.
Yeah.
And whole foods, exercise, mobility, de-stressing. But talk a little bit about sleep, because what I found to be very interesting was a few months ago, last year, I ran this sleep challenge, and
Mhm.
I do challenges every month, and like water fasting, 10,000 steps, cold plunge challenge. Um, and I ran this sleep challenge. What was really astounding to me was that we had thousands of people sign up into this. And when we started doing questionnaires and surveys and doing the open dialogue and finding out, what's your sleep routine? Virtually no one, I would say 2% of the people that signed up for this challenge could even tell me what their sleep routine was. They had
Wow.
no sort of mechanism. But if I said, what's your exercise routine? What do you do in the morning to get the kids to school? It's like, bam, I did this at this time, this at this time, bus leaves at 8:24. I mean,
Yeah.
they're on their game, and they usually have the same kind of structure around their job, or maybe even the structure around their exercise. They've got planned
Mhm.
workouts. And so I introduced the concept of planning your sleep, and it was like, oof, like blew their mind. I mean, you've already told me like I could have been 8:30,
Yeah. Yeah.
which like Brian Johnson, who by the way is in town. He has his Don't Die Summit going on here
Oh,
right now.
nice.
But I believe that a lot of the success that he's having in his age reversal has to do with the fact that he's so highly focused on sleep. And women in particular, the majority of your hormones are produced during deep phases of sleep cycles.
Mhm.
And so if you're not sleeping, um, this could be showing up on your labs as hormonal imbalance or even insulin resistance. And then you're going down a road chasing a pathology that's not there because you're just skipping the basics. So
Yeah.
can you talk about a little bit about your sleep? What's your sleep routine like? What's some of your sleep hacks for
Yeah.
women?
Well, first thing that I have found really interesting is that women need more sleep than men. So the research supports about 6 to 20 minutes, but based on my N of one studies, I've been very lucky to be able
N
to.
of one.
Yes.
Based on my lifelong experiment, clinical
Yes.
study.
Based on my, experience. So I did 2 months of just, go to bed at 8:30, wake up whenever you feel like it. So I'm very blessed to be able to do
Mm.
that. On average, I need I need an hour or more of sleep than my husband.
Mhm.
So I am at least getting 8 hours. So I think that's one myth, that women should not feel that they have to get the same amount of sleep as their male counterpart, or that 6 hours is going to work for them
Mhm.
for so many reasons. Why do women need more sleep? I mean, we know that we're slower detoxers, right? So when our bodies are detoxing at night, that can take longer. Our hormones, and the changes within hormones. So when we even get into the late luteal phase, with the progesterone increase, we might even need more sleep late
Mhm.
luteal while menstruating. So I find that to be really interesting.
I
Women need
noticed
more
that with my
sleep.
wife too.
Yeah,
Like during the menstrual part of her cycle, the menstruating part of her cycle, she definitely needs more sleep, which
totally.
makes sense. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you're losing iron, you're maybe even slightly anemic.
Yeah, we also have a huge inflammatory cascade that's going on
Yeah.
as the uterine lining is shedding. So there's so many reasons, but I think, just focusing on high quality sleep for women
Mhm.
is so important. So for me, what does that look like? I am done eating by 5:30. So you want to give yourself at least about 3 hours prior to bed to digest your food.
Mhm.
I go by the rule, if the sun has set, you're not meant to be eating.
Mm.
So I watch the sunset. We have a great view of like the Hollywood Hills, watch the sunset go down. It's usually around 5 or 5:30 right now in LA. And then I'm done eating by then. At that point, all the lights in my house go red. So we know
All of
that,
them go red.
yeah, yeah, all
Wow.
red. Even
Love that.
much to my husband's chagrin, I figured out that you can actually turn the TV on a color filter and turn it completely red, like the phone. I mean, he was so upset. He's like, "This is not
So he's
the
like
same."
watching baseball. And
Yeah, it's like nothing.
Yeah. You
He's
could
like,
just get red light glasses.
I do have red light
Oh, of
glasses,
course you do.
but they're not very comfortable. And
Yeah.
then he's being exposed. So, yes, you could. So, anyways, red lights all at night. We should talk about light for women too.
Yeah,
Because
no,
think
I definitely want to
the
talk
demand is like slightly more for a variety of reasons.
about it.
But red light goes on. I do, parasympathetic activity. So I like this thing. I'm using a pulsetto right now, which is like
I
a
do too. Yeah.
vagus nerve stimulator. So
Yeah.
put that on the sleep mode, get into a really relaxed state. I try to get my heart rate as low as possible
Mm.
prior to bed because I've really learned that it helps the quality of my sleep and my sleep scores. Like every night I get like a 97, 98 sleep score, and I use Aura. So Aura doesn't let you get 100, I don't think. I
Yeah.
don't know a single person that's ever gotten 100 sleep score. Do you?
I don't know on an Aura. I've gotten them on 8 sleep
Yeah.
and I've gotten 98, 99. I've gotten hundreds on. Yeah, I've gotten hundreds
Yeah.
on Whoop.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
possible though in Aura ring.
Yeah. I'm pretty regularly 98, 99, 97 on sleep and
Yeah.
8 sleep and Whoop.
So anyways, good
Okay.
good sleep scores,
good to know
but
that.
getting the resting heart rate as low as possible.
Mhm.
For me, it's like doing something relaxing, cuddling with my husband, reading. Don't do anything fear inducing. Don't turn on for some reason women love to watch murder shows. I've heard that's like a thing.
Oh, it's such a thing.
I wouldn't recommend watching that
Yeah.
right before bed because it's like really anxiety inducing.
Right.
That's the opposite of what you want to be doing.
Mhm.
And then we keep our room completely blackout. So we now know that even
Super.
light right on the skin can still disrupt your circadian clock and decrease your amount of melatonin. So that can be disruptive. Keep the room super cool. So, 65 Fahrenheit is what we keep our room at.
So awesome.
I also think you should try to make your sleep environment as restorative as possible. So you could get like a switch to turn your Wi-Fi off. I, like you, have a Faraday cage. So I've measured it. The EMFs are 0 inside the
Yep.
Faraday cage. So you could do something like that or just get like a Wi-Fi switch. I love like a weighted blanket for me, really helps increase my
so
sleep.
awesome.
And Aura, it says, I think it increases deep sleep by about 2%.
Wow.
Weighted blanket.
And over time, that's a big number because
Definitely.
I mean, all we're trying to do is just get those
incremental
little.
gains,
Yeah,
right?
if you're going to be sleeping anyway,
Yeah.
so if you
Totally.
can improve it.
I've also recently, I used to do sauna right after exercise
Mhm.
to extend some of those exercise benefits, but I've recently moved it to about 2 hours prior to bed. And
Mhm.
I found, pretty significant improvements in my sleep too. You don't want to do it too close to bed because again, it's going to jack up your heart rate and then
Right.
you're not going to get as good of
We
sleep.
we really find the same thing, and I encourage people to do sauna or what I call a contrast shower, just a hot and cold shower. We have cold plunges. One of them's a little bit warmer, so like in the 60s. So after a good long sauna session, just a quick dip in there, just to kind of start to bring the temperature back down.
Yeah.
Not a long hermetic stressor. And those are the nights that my wife really sleeps well when we do the sauna. So I would agree with you there. And I think it has something to do with sort of breaking the cycle of your day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your day's active and there's all this stuff on your mind. You got all these catecholamines. You're really in a awakened state. I think a lot of women in particular are really susceptible to the rise in these catecholamines at night. So they're kind of in this body tired, but mind awake state.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just ruminating about the most innocuous little things, right? Nothing's going
Yeah.
to change your life. And it just robs you of being able to go to sleep. So do you read in bed?
I actually don't do anything in bed other than sleep. So it's really, I've developed like my bedroom or my bed just for sleep. But I will read prior, just to relax. I obviously make sure like my magnesium levels are optimized. Sometimes I'll do magnesium at night.
Oh, I love that.
I don't really need a sleep stack. I do make them for my husband though. I do like glycine, apigenin, a little bit of L-theanine, and some magnesium in there. Works great for him.
He likes
I
that.
just
Are
like,
you guys on the kind of the same sleep schedule?
yeah. I mean, he used to stay up way later.
Yeah.
And of course, he's like, kind of changed that now, but he feels better than he ever is. And also, when I first met him, we had this whole experience with his testosterone where I asked him, he was on a tiny bit of tea. Obviously, I wanted babies. So I was like, hey, do you mind to get off that? He did. Testosterone went down a bit, but then I put him through an entire detox protocol, changed his diet, lifestyle upgrades, and his testosterone is now like 916 naturally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And how old is he, if you don't mind me asking?
He's 37.
So 916 at 37 would be amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
my community would kill to have testosterone that low. I mean, naturally that high, which
Yeah.
which really brings me to another point. I mean, it is amazing how well the human body functions when you give it the raw material it needs to do its job. We forget
Yeah.
that. I think the best pharmacy is right here, you know,
Yeah.
and when we access the power that this has over this, um, and we we what's really interesting is what you're really talking about is just getting back to the basics,
Yeah.
right? Sort of avoiding all of the modern day things that we do, like regulating our temperature, regulating our lighting. You know, you can make it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you can make it the surface of the sun in your bedroom
Yeah.
if you want to.
Yeah.
But then your circadian biology is so jacked. HapB is an award-winning digital wellness company, and we invite you to join us in transforming the way people rest, renew, and focus. The goal is to help people take control of how they sleep, how they feel, and how they perform, all without taking drugs, supplements, or high caffeine energy drinks. The neuroscientists at HapB have created a set of mood enhancing programs. They're called vibes. So each vibe uses ultra low frequency signals to mimic the effects of relaxants or stimulants in the body. When the brain detects these signals, it reacts as if you're actually taking the substance, giving you all the benefits without the downsides. So it puts you in control of how you want to feel when you want to feel it naturally with no chemicals, pills, or side effects. Just select a vibe on the HapB app and let the soothing electromagnetic waves wash over your body. At HapB, we believe a more rested world is a better world. It's time to change the vibe. Now let's get back to the Ultimate Human podcast. And so where do you fall on like a morning routine, like breath work or sunlight or grounding, or where do you
Yeah.
fall? What are some of your because you're on a travel bender right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'm on a
You're here
little.
today.
Yeah.
You're in Nashville tonight, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nashville, New York City. So this is a rarity. I'm much more of a homebody simply because I like to have my environment the way that I
Right.
enjoy it, because there's so many variables now while
Right.
traveling. But my morning routine takes about an hour and a half. I mean, I get up. First thing I do as practically possible is get sunlight into the
Mhm.
eyes, help to, really improve my circadian rhythm. Also really good for women too, because the vitamin D, we know that women suffer from more osteoporosis, really helps to regulate the hormones.
Mhm.
Big fan of morning sun.
Yeah.
So do that. And then I head to the gym. My strength training routine, I have my strength training routine, and then I have a split. So I'm hitting all areas of longevity. I have 2 VO2 max training days.
Mm.
I have 2 to 3 strength training days. I incorporated a power day, which is new, but really wanting to maintain those fast twitch muscle fibers. So I have
Jumping, box jumps,
yeah,
or
box jumps, explosive push-ups, super fast squats. It's like a little circuit that I do, and it's great because I don't want us to forget about power because we need to maintain that as we get
yeah.
older.
Well, frailty in older ages is one of the hallmarks of mortality.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's very significant in women because sarcopenia, osteoporosis. So I do a lot of on my strength training days, do a lot of compound lifting, so really loading the bones.
Mm.
And then I measure all this stuff at home too, by the way. So I have a really smart scale where I look at my bone density, my body composition, my fat mass, my muscle mass. I just hit a PR, by the way, on the grip strength. I'm at 100 pounds.
Is that the one that you
Yeah.
grab?
Yep.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And there's a direct relationship between, grip strength and longevity.
No doubt.
It's
Peter
a
Tia talks about it all the
proxy
time.
for overall strength. So as women, it's not really talked about for us to measure
Mhm.
these things, but I think looking at your lung health through like a spirometer, your grip strength, knowing what your body composition is, how much muscle do you have? How much fat do you have?
Mhm.
What's your bone density like? Super, super important. So I'll go to the gym and hit one of those metrics that I'm working on. And then I come home. I usually do my biometrics, all the things I just mentioned. On a weekly basis, I do the lung health, look at my sleep. I do blood pressure. I do grip strength. I do body composition, all that stuff at
Mhm.
home. And then I will do PEMF and a little bit of like reading, prayer, meditation, something to just set my mind, as I say, before the day sets it for me. So before, you get emails and calls and things happen, I like to really try to put myself into a more relaxed state.
Mm.
And then I will usually have breakfast. So I usually like to eat pretty close to when I work out, always aiming for high protein. So I
Mhm.
try to get about 30 grams plus of protein per
Wow,
meal. So
amazing. I
I
love
get
that
about
too.
100 grams of protein a day. I weigh about 122. So that's super important for me. And then I put a lot of my biohacking stuff throughout the day as well. So I do like a Nanovi, which helps reduce oxidative stress. And then I do PEMF like at my
What
desk
it's
while
called a
working.
Nanovi?
Nanovi, yeah.
What's that?
It's
I think I've seen that
yeah,
machine. It
it's
has
a
the
German
tube.
device with the nasal cannula.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is that doing?
So it's supposed to reduce oxidative stress and improve protein folding. So we know
Wow.
oxidative stress is a root cause of many different diseases.
Yeah. And is it a gas?
No, it's actually creating a frequency and you're inhaling it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's right. I've seen those, and I didn't go down the rabbit hole of those. I mean, I know most of the things you're talking about, especially the pulsetto. Actually, Cristiano Ronaldo gave me one of those when I
Oh,
went to see him
wow.
in Saudi Arabia, and when I left, he gave it to me as a gift. And I first tried it on the plane coming back,
Mm.
and then I actually had a client of mine staying with me. He's also a very dear friend, and he was suffering from very severe tinnitus, and it was actually triggering panic attacks.
Mm.
And I was in the living room one day, and my son came running around the corner. He's like, "Hey, Dad, he's actually laying in the hallway." And so I went around the hallway, and he was laying up against the wall, and he was having a panic attack. And I, the worst thing you can do is try to reason somebody out of having a panic attack. There's nothing for you to be afraid of. There's no reason for you to feel this way. So I just calmly put the pulsetto on him, and I ran the anxiety app, and I'm getting like 6 minutes into a 9-minute session. He was very
That's
calm.
amazing.
I think it just overrode that signal coming through the vagus nerve. So I think a lot of these, which you could travel with some of these.
Yeah, for sure.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you. So the Nano V, and then you said you also have a pulse electromagnet PMF mat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just keep that going actually throughout the day. I have it in my office chair.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's interesting because I did a test
Like the full body, like
yeah.
one, yeah.
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 I did a test called a Mead test, and it actually measures essentially the voltage of your body. And we know that I kind of think about it like all these hits of like poor food and, lack of exercise, lack of movement is like draining our voltage, like our cellular voltage,
I
right?
would agree with that.
So we can do things like grounding, which is free. It just takes a lot longer. So I have the PEMF device at home. So I love doing that as well. Actually, 2 things that I didn't mention in the beginning, though. I have a very extensive oral health routine because we know that the oral microbiome and overall health is directly connected. We've known about the link to like cardiovascular disease for a very long time, but now it's becoming more and more prevalent. I see a biological dentist, which is like the functional medicine of dentistry. So I do, ozone oil pulling, of course, like flossing, a really great, brush in the morning, tongue scraping. And then that's obviously the first thing that I do.
So because I'm actually talking about on my challenge on Wednesday, I'm talking about oil pulling, tongue scraping, flossing, the importance of all of those things, even really the importance of getting metal amalgamates out of the mouth.
Oh gosh, it's wild that it's even legal.
Yeah. And even root canals. I mean, I can show you how
Oh yeah.
I'm waiting for a tooth.
Yeah.
Because I had a root canal that a biologic dentist cleaned out for me, and I had a big cavitation underneath of it.
Yeah.
And what was amazing was I had 2 root canals, and one day I just bit down on something and I cracked this tooth. And so I called my buddy who's a biologic dentist, Dr. Gandhi, and he was like, take a picture of it. And so I took a picture of it and sent it to him. It was the 19th tooth meridian. So he asked me if I had left anterior shoulder pain, left lower lobe lung pain. And the craziest thing that just literally blew my mind was he said, does your left toe ever go numb?
Wow.
And I was like, dude, you are freaking me out, because I actually do have a little left anterior shoulder pain, which I just thought was a little bicep tendonitis from working out or whatever. And I would only get the left lower lobe pain when I was doing like HIIT cardio or something. But my left toe occasionally would go numb. And my wife used to tease me because I would like tap it, or I would tap it with my heel. And then it wasn't enough to like drive me to the ER or anything. But and he's like, oh, you definitely have a cavitation in that tooth. And when he cone beam x-rayed it, you could see it. And when he took it out, cleaned it, ozone, put platelet-rich fibrin in there. He actually ran ozone gas, red light, and replaced it. Literally within 48 hours, all of those symptoms went away. And that's been 2 years and it hasn't come back.
Yeah.
And, or almost 2 years. So I am such a big believer in that. Now, how do you do ozone oil pulling?
Yeah. Actually, my friend owns a company. It's Simply O3. They make a lot of ozone generators too.
I have a Simply O3.
Oh, nice.
Right in
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
they make
Shout out.
an ozonated oil pulling solution.
They
So
do?
yeah. So
They
I
make a
just use
solution
that.
that's already ozonated?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it stays in there even when they ship it to you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It tastes a little bit like ozone because ozone has a
Oh
very
yeah.
distinct.
Oh yeah. I've like come to love it though because I do so many
Yeah, because
different
you
types of
associate it with
ozone.
being clean. So
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
It's like I used to love the smell of bleach because it meant that things are, I don't
Ooh.
like it anymore.
Yeah.
But it just used to tell me, all right, well, this locker room's clean,
Yeah.
or this is sanitary. I don't associate those anymore. But so it's an oil, like a coconut oil or something, do you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in an oil and it's already ozonated and it's in a nice like glass bottle, no microplastics. And I just swish it around for about 20 minutes.
20
And
minutes. See, that's the thing about oil pulling, man.
yeah,
It's a
I know.
commitment.
It is. I mean, you could always do less, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll do like stretching and other things and just pass some time,
Mhm.
start my protein coffee. So I left out, first of all, oral health routine. I think it's super important. I also do oral microbiome testing. So
Mm.
or oral biome testing. So it tells you levels of bad bacteria, good bacteria, just like a gut test. But we want to make sure that that's optimal too, ideally.
Yeah,
for
there's oral
overall health.
probiotics that you can take too
Yeah.
just for your oral microbiome, which are
Yeah.
really good. They're like a chewable.
Yeah, I have those.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I forget the name of the brand that I have. Is it BioHarvest? I don't know. If I find out, I'll link it in the show notes. But it's actually oral probiotic, and I couldn't be more on board with you because, I think ancestrally our microbiome was so important, and obviously it still is, and it all starts in the mouth,
Mhm.
and it's if you actually saw an image of the nerves leaving the jaw and all the pathways out of your
Mhm.
out of your mouth into your neck into your brain, you realize how pathogens, obviously this is a great way to get in,
Yeah.
and where they can go to and how many consequences they can have that
Mhm.
we're not tying back to our oral microbiome. And what's really interesting is I think dentistry is the only practice of medicine that thinks that you can leave dead tissue in the body, right? So you kill
Yeah.
a tooth and you kill a nerve, and they're like, well, it's okay to leave that in there. I mean, if your appendix died, they would take it out, right? I mean, if something
Yeah.
goes necrotic in your body, you need to remove it.
Mhm.
So you have these two necrotic things in your mouth if you've actually had a root canal, and you don't feel it. It's pain. Like that was totally painless for me. Had I not
Oh,
cracked
really?
that tooth, which I look at as a blessing now,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten both of these removed. And is whatever you want to call it, woke to wellness as I am, aware of, for me to have these two cavitations just literally blew my mind.
Yeah.
All right. So then you're inch your way through now do you take a lot of this on the road? I mean, it's portable for you.
Yeah, quite a bit of it. I mean, I travel with a few things for sure. But also, like today, well, I do want to mention for women one thing that's important. So again, a big learning was I no longer train fasted. I think that women do better
I
with
totally agree with you on that
protein.
too.
So I do a protein coffee. So a little bit, about a half a cup of coffee, with a little bit of, for me, raw milk. Again, be advised. I don't know what the quality is of raw milk everywhere, and then I do a little bit of colostrum and a little bit of creatine, 5 grams of creatine.
We got Erewhon, so
Love. Yeah.
you're
We got
loving
Air
life out
One.
there.
So yeah, we're fine.
Yeah.
When you buy it off the shelf at a regular grocery store, I feel pretty good about that. So
Yeah.
so that's what I do before training. But I
Okay.
think that's an important takeaway for women is that we do seem to do better training fed.
I
So
could not agree with you more. In fact, I think some of the most frustrating cases that we ever had come through our clinic are younger, fit women that are really healthy and they're exercising, and they'll say, "Look, I wake up at, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I have a cup of black coffee. I'm fasted. I go to Orange Theory. I go
Yeah.
hammer down for
Yeah.
55 minutes. I do that 5 days a week. I've been doing it for 3 months, and I haven't lost a single pound. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?" I'm like, you're not eating, but your body is. It's just kind of eating you.
Yeah.
You're probably metabolizing a lot of lean muscle and not having your fat reserves. And I think sometimes it's counterintuitive, especially for women, to eat to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Mhm.
doesn't intuitively make sense. But if you keep your protein intake up, you're
Yeah.
right. So you make sure that you get protein in the morning. Now, are you spending a lot of time at your clinics?
Not at this point.
Okay.
We had the first one's in Ohio.
Mhm.
So now I live in LA, but we are going to open one later this year in LA.
Oh, God, great.
But basically, I had to buy all the things at the clinic and then put them in my house because I miss them all so much. So
You've been loving this research project, right?
oh, love the best ever. So, but yeah. So
I'm on the
spend
same
quite a bit of
bandwagon.
time.
So what are some of the most exciting things for you in terms of female health, wellness, longevity? You're either going to bring into the clinic or you want women to know about state of wellness and longevity for women. Where does this clinic take you in terms of the impact you're going to have on female
Well,
longevity?
one of the biggest things that I'm so interested in right now is ovarian aging. So, again, I've spoken to so many different experts. We don't know why the ovaries are aging at double the speed of every other organ. So, I'm just using first principles thinking here. And there's a few things that I've done. So, I did start taking rapamycin because some of the preliminary studies, they haven't yet gone through peer review, but this can potentially delay ovarian aging by about 5 years. Because if you think
Wow.
about a woman, so women live longer than men, about 4 to 6 years on average than men. But when you hit menopause, your risk for all causes of mortality increases
So true.
substantially. So if we can delay the onset of menopause and keep the ovaries healthy and functioning and the hormones where they're at, then that could be massive for female longevity, right? So some of the things that I'm doing that I think are interesting are low-level laser therapy. There's been some interesting studies on fertility. Actually, there was a study out of Japan with infertile women, and then they did low-level laser therapy. So it's slightly different than red light. It is red, but it can
Transdermal, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
They actually did the proximal technique. So they were just putting a low-level laser on the neck, and it was actually reducing the inflammation in the ovary so much that I think about 20 to 25 participants got pregnant. And these were all people with severe infertility.
Wow.
So please add that potentially to the stack of things. It's in my stack of things I'm doing for fertility optimization and ovarian health in general. So I have a little low laser there.
And you do it at home.
Yeah, I do it at home that I do right on the ovaries. And then I also do it on my neck as well, considering that's how the studies were done. So I think that's super interesting. But if we think about the inflammatory cascade or reasons that the ovaries could be aging so fast, so it could be the inflammatory process. So we have this entire cascade of inflammation happening as the uterine lining builds and then sheds every single month, right? So what I'm doing is doing even more red light therapy during that time on the ovaries, on the uterus, and I'm doing hyperbaric oxygen strategically during that time as well. So I will increase. So I've already done my loading doses of hyperbaric for the year. And there's also some
60
interesting
hours.
I did about 40.
Okay.
And so I did 1 hour, 5 sessions per week for 40 sessions at 2.0 for my body protocol. And then I did that same, 40 sessions, 5 sessions per week at 1 hour at 1.5 for my brain protocol. So I've had those completed. But there's also interesting data on hyperbaric.
And you committed to that 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Because that's a buy-in right there.
It is. But for me,
Although
it's
I
like
did
the
see
most
your first
exciting
date was
thing.
in a hyperbaric chamber.
My first date was in a hyperbaric chamber.
That's so awesome. Her and her husband's first. You were in the New York Times for your labs you made your husband get for it, which I think is amazing. I know you gotten a lot of flack for it, but I think that's amazing. But if you started your first date in it, you're committed to you have it at the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way
chamber.
to 2 ATA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a serious
But
chamber.
it's nice because you can actually swap it out and you can take it lower. So that's great. So you can put in a 1.5 and then
and it's really interesting. The first person that's actually brought that up is that, I had a hyperbaric expert here, Dr. Jonathan Saunders, and he's written 2 amazing books on hyperbaric therapies. He's a chiropractor, getting his PhD in hyperbaric medicine. And he was explaining to me that it's not one or the other, that different pressures actually have different, exude different results. And the brain protocol at 1.3 to 1.5, also what he was saying, and the deeper pressures for mitochondrial proliferation, things like that. It's just a commitment, so you have to get one at home. But they make some great soft shell chambers that are safe and can get you there. And I think it's important, especially in light of the tragedy that just happened recently in the hyperbarics, to note that the hyperbaric chambers that are not 100% O2 are not flammable, right? So they can't become accidental bombs. The ones that run 100% O2, I don't even know if you can even legally get those in the home.
You're
But if you
not
can, you
supposed
shouldn't.
to.
You
Yeah.
know, even with the prescription, because those are potentially explosive. It's like hydrogen gas. It's very 100% O2 is very flammable. Hi guys, Gary here. I want to take a few minutes of your time to invite you to my Ultimate Human VIP community. This is a private community with front row seats to my most advanced health protocols, exclusive monthly Q&A calls, a private podcast where you can ask my guests and me your most pressing questions, and my own personal wellness blueprints, and everything you need to optimize your health. You'll connect with like-minded folks in this community. You'll get firsthand access to cutting-edge insights and enjoy special discounts on products that I trust the most. And here's the best part. Membership is just $97 a month, a fraction of the cost my private clients pay for the same deep dive guidance. If you're ready to supercharge your wellness and skip the guesswork, I'd love for you to join us. Head to theultimatehuman.com/VIP. That's theultimatehuman.com/VIP right now to become one of my Ultimate Human VIPs. This is your fast pass to better health, so don't miss it. Now let's get back to the Ultimate Human podcast. So you ran this hyperbaric protocol, and you got your loading dose done. Now, do you still do it on a regular basis, or?
Yeah. So now I'm really trying to align it with this inflammatory cascade of my cycle, because again, we don't have the data, but that's why I'm doing all this insane amount of testing. I want to see, how long I can extend my ovarian health. So I'm doing hyperbaric strategically alongside my cycle to potentially reduce that inflammatory cascade. The other thing that's important to know is that actually the highest density, one of the highest densities after the heart, I believe, is the mitochondria in the oocytes, which, will develop into eggs. And so I am always thinking, okay, number one, you need to improve your mitochondrial health overall, right? HIIT training, absolutely incredible for that.
Red light.
Increases the amount of mitochondria, can help to kind of kill off the bad mitochondria. So HIIT training is a big part of that. But I also love things like pomegranate and, urolithin A in terms of diet that I didn't mention before. And then red light therapy, right? Like I am doing a lot of red light therapy to try to improve those mitochondria in the oocytes because there's such a high density.
Right.
So that's something to really think about as well.
Yeah.
And with hyperbaric, there is actual research. A lot of this is still developing, right? Like I have friends that are conducting trials on AMH, which is the anti-Müllerian hormone, or ovarian reserves, and hyperbaric. But there is data on improving sperm quality. So fertility is 50%.
Wow.
It's the husband 50% and the wife 50%. So it could be either or partner or both if there's issues with fertility. So all the protocols I'm going through, my husband has also done. So
That's
the gut
amazing.
and the toxins and all of the different like lab markers, he does that as well, so that we're both coming to the plate. And we've both had really in-depth testing. He's looked at, motility and the quality of the sperm and all of that. And it's in the highest region it can be.
That's awesome.
And then I've done all of the, my AMH is about 5.8, which is super high for my age. But, I've also taken all the other markers. So it's nothing like PCOS, because sometimes people with PCOS can have really high AMH. So if you're a woman, you
and
should
the higher
definitely.
the AMH, is this corresponding to a longer?
Potentially. We don't know yet,
okay.
right? But it could be.
Okay.
But then too high too. So women that have PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, they will all have a really, really high AMH, usually like 10 plus. But that's because, there are so many, different cysts actually developing. So if you have that, you also, of course, want to work with a doctor to take care of or manage PCOS, which is mostly a metabolic disorder, to reduce that, because it makes getting pregnant more difficult because your period becomes really erratic.
And I love that you just said that PCOS, this polycystic ovarian syndrome, it's a metabolic disorder. Can you dig into that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's interesting because, women of all sizes and ages can develop PCOS. It's incredibly common at this point, but we see that its roots are really in insulin resistance. So, these diets that are really high in like these refined sugars and carbohydrates, like you mentioned, just starting to track. And then, of course, we add on like potentially lack of exercise or these endocrine disruptors, all of these things. It can, it's not just one thing. It's not saying that you're not working out or you're not eating healthy. It could be in your environment as well. Going back to why environmental toxin testing could be so important. But we know that people reverse PCOS. So that's really exciting that you can do that. I love, for me, wearing a continuous glucose monitor is really helpful too, just to make sure that my, in addition to blood labs of insulin and glucose, but you have an at-home real-time experience of your blood sugar. So I love doing that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think that, you know, for the women that are listening to this, which lots of women are going to be listening to this, you know, what I love is there's a place to start that's going to be low or no out of pocket costs, which are things you can fix right away, like, you
Yeah.
know, your sleep, your diet. I don't think that, you know, sunlight grounding and breath work can be overemphasized. I don't think that like timing your circadian clock can be
Yeah.
overemphasized. So these are all what I would say are, you know, modifiable lifestyle factors that, you know, should be the first go-tos, you know, before you even
Yeah.
invest in expensive equipment and whatnot. I mean, just getting yourself back to the basics. In terms of supplementation, what would you say are the go-to female basics?
Yeah, I try to lump my supplements into 3 sections. So I have my absolute basics. Those are going to be things like magnesium, fish oil, vitamin D. I mean, I
Hmm.
keep my vitamin D level around 70.
It's
So
great.
really important for
60 to
fertility, but
80,
also boosting your immune system.
breast cancer for
Yeah,
women. I mean, a lot of good
absolutely.
studies in the 60, 80 nanogram range.
Totally. So
Yeah.
keeping those optimized. There's a lot of interesting new research coming out with NAD or NMN
Mm.
supplementation and fertility. So I do different varieties. I do IV therapies a couple times a year, sometimes do boosters, but you can also just do NMN supplementation. I think that's a really good one. And then I have other supplements that I really like. I think that something like Metopure or urolithin A can be really helpful.
Hmm.
I think there's some research on CoQ10 for improving egg quality. I like it's actually a prenatal. It's called Natal. So it really hits a lot of these required nutrients that
Hmm.
we need as women. So that's kind of like a one-stop shop. Thorne also has like an ovarian care, so has like some myoinositol, has some of the like vitamin A, the B vitamins that you need, of course, in the methyl forms. So they're more bioavailable for
Oh,
you.
I love that. You're
Yeah.
saying that too. That's
Yeah.
right up my alley.
Yeah, but this is a great one. It could be a good multivitamin just for women too, but finding something that hits all of your basic nutritional
Hmm.
requirements. I do the Nutri-Eval, so I know exactly what I'm deficient in, and then I supplement for that.
Does a Nutri-Eval look at is that like a cellular nutrition assay? Is that actually looking at cellular concentration
Yeah, it
or
actually
just
is
like
both.
blood?
It is both intra
Okay.
and outracellular.
Okay, so that's really interesting
Yeah.
because you know, I've found in this type of testing, I didn't know that the NutriVal combined the two, but if you do a cellular nutrition assay like intracellular
Mhm.
concentration, and then sometimes do blood, which is serum concentration,
Yeah.
you see things like B12 sky high in the blood, but deficient in the cell. And you
Yeah.
see that, you know, it's not methylating it. And you
Yeah.
switch the form B12 and you
Yeah.
know, it instantly the cell begins to
I think
metabolize it.
I feel like everyone should be on methylated B vitamins, though,
Oh, I
right?
do too.
Just like as a
You're
baseline.
singing my tune. I think
Yeah.
methylated B vitamins, methylfolate, yeah, and the methyl form of B12. I mean, those are just basics. D3, K2. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. And a good to make a 3.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So I have my like those are my foundational basics. Then I have my protocol basics. So whatever my updated protocol is.
mhm.
So let's say right now I'm working on detox, right? So I have all this additional glutathione, sulforaphane, vitamin C, some quercetin, binders. So that's like what I'm working on right now based on my labs. And then my
Mhm.
longevity stack that looks like I'm really interested in spermidine right now. I think
Mm.
that's an interesting molecule. So that's in my longevity stack. The NAD or NMN is super helpful for me. I also like to put a little bit of methylene blue. That's kind of more on the
I
Nick
do
side,
too.
but I like to combine that with the red light therapy.
Hmm.
And
So you just take it beforehand, like 20, 30 minutes
yeah,
beforehand.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've done
same.
IVs of
I
it
did that
too.
this morning.
Super fun.
Yeah, super fun.
Yeah, it's a little
until you take a pee, and then you're
yeah.
like, whoa.
Well, yes, yeah, but it's such a cute little
Yeah.
IV. It's like a little baby one.
It's
So
it's a baby one, yeah. And
yeah,
you know, the interesting thing about methylene blue is, you know, it's really effective in low doses. There's a
yeah,
great book called, I think it's called The Ultimate Guide to Methylene Blue. And
yeah,
I'll tell you, if you can get it on audiobook. And for nerds like us, you know, it's great listening on the plane or something. And I've read it probably 3 times and listened to it probably 4 times. I've almost committed the entire book to memory. What I love about it is, I mean, if you're not in love with methylene blue by the time you're done
yeah,
reading that book, you'll never be in love with it. And you know, the way that it enhances, I like the compounds that enhance natural physiology or physiological processes in the body. The NMN raising your own levels of NAD, you know, methylene
mm,
blue improving like the binding affinity of iron and getting more oxygen into the cell, which means more oxygen in the mitochondria, which, you know, is really the end game, is to try to
yeah.
have super healthy mitochondria. And all of these things that you're doing are really just feeding your cellular biology. I mean, the red light for your mitochondria. I mean, you guys are going to have the healthiest. I want to buy stock in all the babies you have, right? Because these are going to be like the healthiest overachievers. So
oh my gosh,
it's amazing. This Kayla, this has been amazing. I'm so glad that you came on the podcast. I definitely want to have you back again, follow your journey, especially follow the journey you're on with your husband. I just think it's magical that you guys did you made him give you the labs beforehand.
Yeah.
You had your first date in a hyperbaric chamber, and you guys are so committed to this journey because I think, I think on this longevity and biooptimization journey in general, I think there's more women than men. And I think a lot of times, the husband's not on board with the wife, she's sort of in it on her own, even though I have a larger male audience than a female audience. Most of the females that I'm talking to are way more involved and into it. We know they buy 80% of all the supplements.
Yeah.
They're listening to most of the podcasts and digesting most of the information out there. So I think it's amazing to be, a couple like Skinny Confidential that are, on this journey together, know. So I think
so fun.
I think that's amazing. From my audience that doesn't know you, where can they find you?
Yeah. My website is KaylaBarnes.com, KaylaBarnes.com.
Mm-hmm.
I also post, a lot of content on YouTube newly. I think I'm
Amazing
the only
too.
woman posting long form longevity content actually on YouTube.
Oh, awesome.
I think so, unless there's more, but I think so. And then Instagram at Kayla Barnes. And my clinic is live-wellness.com.
Okay, live-wellness.com. So I wind down every podcast by asking my guests the same question. So there's no right or wrong answer to this question. And then we'll stop the podcast and we'll go into a private room for my VIPs, my Ultimate Human VIPs. I tipped them off to what guests are coming onto the podcast. And so they knew you were coming on. So they have a list of questions for you.
Oh, yeah.
And I really try to pour myself into this group. So if you're interested in becoming an Ultimate Human VIP, just go over to theultimatehuman.com and sign up to be one of my VIPs. It's $97 a month. And I just pour myself into this community. So Kayla, what does it mean to you to be an Ultimate Human?
Wake up every day bursting with energy, limitless drive, and being able to show up for those that you love.
So good. Yeah. And I love that you said that because I think women especially, I have a theory that the reason why the majority of autoimmune disease is we find in females and not men is because women are so selfless and they very often will view self-care as being selfish. But what you're doing is very selfless. This is selfless for your husband. It's eventually going to be selfless for your kids, your career. I'm sure your clinic needs you. I'm sure your employees need you. And it's like, how do you show up for them if you're not, caring for yourself? So I love that.
I think health is the foundation of greatness. I always say that.
I think longevity is the new, it's the new luxury.
It truly is. I mean, I've heard that having abs is like more rare than being a millionaire these days.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if that's true, but
you can fake a Ferrari, but you can't fake abs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, that's awesome. So guys, hopefully you'll join us in the VIP Ultimate Human community. But if not, I will link all of the topics that we talked about, some of the modalities that we talked about, links to her Instagram and her podcast, and also to some of the products that she mentioned on the podcast today. And until next time, that's just science.